All right, it's told me it's recording, so that's a good sign. Alrighty, so I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to Māori, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We welcome everyone to today's event, Women, Diverse Women and all allies of women, including men. The Australasian Women in Emergencies Network promotes, supports and recognises the contributions of women in emergency management and disaster resilience across Australasia. We focus on issues that affect the diversity of women, including trans, gender diverse and non-binary people. We welcome all women into our membership and also allies who may not identify as women, but who actively nurture, support and promote women and their contribution to emergency management and disaster resilience. So thank you all for giving up some time out of your day on a Thursday over lunch to join us for this OAR conversation for October. I will apologise in advance. We've got the rubbish bins being emptied outside. I've got the dishwasher on downstairs. So if you can hear lots of noise, I apologise in advance. But for those of you I don't know, I'm Lisa Marie Jackson. I've been in the emergency management sector since 2009, but been in awe of the power and intensity of emergencies my whole life, especially growing up on the shaky land of New Zealand. So it always kept it pretty real. And I think the most recent earthquake we had in Victoria was also just a reminder of the power of the land. I have with me the amazing Snez online, who you're here to hear from rather than me. So we will get into that conversation as soon as we can. I had the honour of online meeting Snez a couple of months ago to discuss her work and mentoring opportunities with regards to the OAR network. I was really taken by her story of survival and recovery and turning that into a program to help others, and felt it was an experience that fellow OAR members would also be inspired by. Snez, I know you're also excited to meet fellow OAR members today and keen to ask them for some advice and guidance, but we'll jump into that later in the session. So how we're going to run the session today is I'm asking you all, if you can, acknowledging you're eating lunch. So if you don't want to eat with your camera on, that's totally fine. But if you can have your camera on, it'd be great to see your faces. It makes it a lot more personal and like we're having a conversation. And if you do have a question, raise your hand. We'll try and make this as conversational as we can. If not, pop it in the chat, and other people online will also contribute to the conversation, and we can jump into the conversation when we jump between questions. We do have a bit of a clip to show you for 4 minutes shortly, but before we do, Snez, let's get to know you a bit more. Keen to know what did you want to be when you grew up, and how has your journey personally and professionally landed you where you are today?
Well, thank you firstly, Lisa, for having me. I'm super excited for the opportunity to be here and to share my story and my work with such an amazing group of women and people that are supporting emergency management recovery. So thank you so much. But to start off with a question, so I am in my PT uniform because I've literally just come from outdoor training, so that's what I do, and I've sort of rushed in here having to cover a staff member today. But in terms of what I wanted to do when I grew up, there is a bit of a story behind it. So before owning a PT business, I'm actually a secondary school PE, maths and science teacher, and that's what I started off doing. And back when I was in primary school, there was a PE teacher. I was quite active with gymnastics and things like that. And there was a PE teacher who I just adored. He was an older gentleman. And when he left, I was in grade 2. And I remember being quite upset by it because I'd be the kid that was pumping up the balls and, you know, sorting out all the sports equipment and doing all of that. And when he left in grade 2, I remember being quite upset. And he came up to me and I went to see him on his last day. And he said, Snezana, you're going to make a magnificent PE teacher one day. And when you finish your year 12, you go and find the University of Pitt and you do the Bachelor of Applied Science in Physical Education. And so they're the words that I had in my mind from grade 2. And it wasn't until I entered RMIT in Bandura and sitting in one of the lectures where I saw an old signage that said Pitt that I reflected and went, oh my goodness, I'm actually in the course that Mr. Powell was his name, said that, I do. And he basically said to me on that last day, now, when you do that course, now you come and find me because I'm involved with PE teachers and I'll get you a great job. And so we have an ASHPA conference, which is a physical education conference that happens every year. And in my first year of teaching, I met him at that conference and he showed up with my grade 2 PE photo, classroom photo. So back from a very young age, I knew being physically active was important to me, and education is what I do. And then when I started family 10 years ago, so I have 3 sons. My eldest is 18, nearly turning 18 in a couple of months. I actually gave up teaching and took on a skill that I had, which was personal training, which is what I did as my uni job. And so I ended up leaving teaching. It was a big decision to leave, but I knew that PT while I was having my family was a good thing to do. And I just very quickly discovered that educating people is what I do everywhere I go. So I started to talk to people about healthy lifestyle habits and looking after themselves. So I still get to fulfill that need. So yeah, from a very young age, I sort of had that idea and that name of that course in my mind.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. It's amazing how many people have a teaching background and you don't even realize. And that's where it's kind of taken you in life, and then using those skill sets in other ways or to also just progress your love, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Snez. We are now going to play a video about your experience. I would like to acknowledge Fire Rescue Victoria for who created the video with Snez, and also note to those on the call that it does relate to Snez and her family's house fire. If that might be triggering for you, please be mindful of your own well-being, and feel free to switch off and come back in 4 minutes, because that's how long the video will go for. So I'll just share my screen, and I'm hoping technology is on my side so that it all works fine. So share screen, here we go. Alrighty, so Snez, can you see the YouTube screen?
Yep.
Awesome.
Do you want to expand that window?
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, we can still see your tab. So maybe that button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to expand the vid.
All right.
Yeah, that's better.
Thanks.
Firefighters and other Victorian Emergency Service personnel play a vital role in the transition to recovery from any incident. Our involvement in the road to recovery for our community needs to start the moment we respond to any event. Making the relief and recovery connection for affected people starts that recovery. This story highlights how important it is for us to assist making those early connections and what happens when we leave and the connection isn't made. We just can't walk away without ensuring our community knows what to do or who to talk to when we leave.
It was just after Christmas in 2010. It was actually my youngest son, the baby, crying, that woke us up. So Alexander woke us, and then when we got up and we started looking around, there was just like a real hint of smoke. And I said to my husband, oh, maybe we should call AAA. And he was like, oh, we've probably left a candle burning. It was Christmas time. He said, let's just locate where it is first.
When I walked outside, around the back, looked under the house, and the house was engulfed in flames. So we quickly ran inside, grabbed the kids, thank God, ran out the house. Yeah,
so we did have smoke alarms installed, and they only switched on when that smoke really started to come through thick and fast.
It
Then we had the fire trucks come. So once we ran out of the house, we sort of stood on the side of the road, and I was with the little ones, sort of trying to reassure them, but reassuring myself that it was going to be okay.
We got our kids out, and that's the main thing. And you know, everything else is incidental. We're going to try to salvage, see what we can find. If we can get one or two gifts, and we'll keep them happy.
Probably one of the things that the kids remember the most, because it was Christmas and they'd got all their Chrissy presents, and that was one thing that they just kept saying, "Mum, we just want to go back into the house. We just wanted to get our Christmas presents." And we were just too devastated to tell them that things had been melted and it was just black.
Like, I had like a bunch of stuff that I got from Santa and like other people, and that was kind of wrecked after like because it smelt of smoke.
That night, my husband and I kept saying to ourselves, "Oh, it's going to be okay, it's fine, we'll just repaint and it'll be no problem." And then after it had been put out and it was safe, we were asked to come in and have a look at it, and we had no idea what we were going to face. And when we saw it, the devastation of just seeing your walls black and seeing your photos charred and the kids' toys melted, and just all those memories that are embedded into your home that were just ruined. And so in the initial stages, we just went through this, let's try and salvage as much as we can. So we had neighbours coming to visit, and everyone was in the backyard, and there was this big washing up, and we're all trying to scrub, and there's just stuff that you just can't scrub off. I just went from room to room and opened cupboard after cupboard and saw ruined things after ruined things. And I just would cry. I would just walk around the house and just cry. So then there was one day where my neighbour just sort of grabbed me by the shoulders and she said, "Enough. This is enough now. You just need to let this go." And so then hubby and I just walked away from it, and we just got friends and family just to dump it all. Once the
Alrighty, I'll stop it there. I'm just checking I've stopped my screen. I have. And I'll just invite Snez to unmute, because I muted you just to prevent any feedback on your microphone there. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for allowing us to share in your story and hear the impact that that event must have had on you and your family. So did you want to talk us through? So the video starts where it highlights the importance of emergency management agencies in assisting people like yourself with making early connections. So when responders leave, they're well supported. Do you want to talk us through your experience post-event?
Yeah, so sorry, I haven't seen that for a little while. So yeah, after the event, so we had, and that footage outside the house with the trucks, that's actually was our home. Like, that was something that was extraordinary when we when MFB, or the change now, happened, that they wanted to put this video together. They were quite surprised at how much footage and how many photos there were. And they sort of said, "Oh, maybe it was just a low news time of year at Christmas time." It wasn't, you know, but there was just a lot of content there to make that video. But so from there, we luckily had neighbours who were both police officers, and they coordinated the evacuation of surrounding neighbours. They're the ones that called 000, so we're very lucky in that way. And at the start, like, I was just, yeah, on the side of the road. We got the kids next door, and pretty much once it was all done, we just called Mum, moved into Mum's place from there, and that was the thing. We were very grateful that we had somewhere that we could just go, and that picture of us on the couch was just a couple of days. That's kind of where we slept and lived for 6 weeks after. But immediately after the fire, I'll never forget that next day where they kept an overnight vigil just to make sure, I think there was 2 firefighters there, just to make sure that it was all secure and okay. And the next day, my husband and I, we went down, and they just sort of showed us around and gave us, I remember, I'll never forget, it was a single DL size brochure of what the next steps or what we should do. And then they just kind of drove off, and I just remember that feeling of, like, what do we do with this? Like, what do we do now? Like, there was just such confusion. And at that stage, like seeing my husband sort of saying that, you know, everything else is incidental. Like at that stage, we had no idea what was coming in the way of recovery and the impact that that whole event was actually going to have. So, so we moved into Mum's, and then we just started to piece together what were the next steps and what did we have to do. And for me, there was just this ongoing sense that I can't believe there's no one that I can call, or like I felt like I had to tell someone about it or report it to someone, or and then that house that we were in was an older home. It was a 60-plus-year-old home in Cloud. So within 5 days, like, and as I said, there was a big recovery. We'd sort of go out every day and the neighbours were there and bringing food, and it was a big coordinated event trying to salvage. And then sort of, I think it was like 5 or 6 days after the fire, we got an email from a letter from council saying that we had to remove the house off the site. So, and that was a bit of a shock to us, like, because we knew the house was beyond repair, but we just had this kind of emotional connection. You just wanted to save as much as you could. And the unfortunately, it was a broken asbestos roof, so I had to get out of there. But for us, it was just that harshness of, hang on a tick, we're kind of like, we just didn't know what to do first. We didn't know, you know, we're still trying to work out turning amenities off, and then hang on a sec, coordinate removing, like, how do you remove your house, you know, off the property? 3 days ago, we'd had, you know, Christmas lunch there. And so it just felt very, very overwhelming in terms of what the next steps were. And then it just kind of continued. And as I said, from those initial couple of days, I just remember thinking to myself, I can't believe there's nothing here. And more importantly, it didn't matter that there was nothing there. It was more important that I felt like I wanted to be able to put something together to help support people. And that was sort of in my, I know that sort of first stage after trauma, you're sort of in this heightened state. And I just thought, you know, that everything was going to be okay, not realizing how long my own recovery would take. But yeah, it just felt very, that we had people reach out to us, giving us advice. Like we had someone see our story on the news and actually contacted the channel, whatever it was, I think 7, who then contacted us because someone had called up the station and said, hey, there's actually, if they call Red Cross, they've got an off payment that they can access. So we kind of were getting support from people around us. And the only real contact that we had from council was, the first one was remove your house off the site within 2 days. And then the second one that we got was an increase in rates because they wanted to encourage us to build back on the site. And for me, from a council perspective, I just like, you know, and my husband John really followed up with that second request because we couldn't even sort ourselves out and trying to settle our kids and, you know, everything that occurred, because that fire, it happened very, very quickly, and we kind of noticed some smoke, and then all of a sudden it was billowing out of every ducted heating vent because it came from the bottom. So we'd sort of pulled our kids out kind of just in time, and dealing with all of that was pretty intense. And trying to, you know, find a new place to live, like there was just so much going on. And then to get something like that, we just thought, well, why doesn't someone come and actually see what we're going through here? And so there was different stages of the recovery, and then eventually we moved into a rental, and then that was very difficult because we had moved from one home to the next. To go into a rental when you don't own anything, we spent months and months of, you know, I'll never forget that one first dinner that I wanted to make something really special, and I was making this really amazing lasagna, and I, you know, got everything and then reached for the lasagna tray and went, crap, I don't have a lasagna tray. And it's little things like that that just, it's nothing, but it just breaks you down. And so I was like, okay, spaghetti tonight. But just, you know, we had lots of donations and things like that, but you were just sort of watching your kids and stuff that you didn't recognise them in, playing with things you didn't recognise. And then I just felt that it had different stages of the recovery process. And one thing that I felt as well was people around you weren't really sure how to support you. And I found that, you know, people with all good intentions were saying things like, oh, you know, it's great, you're going to get all this new stuff. And a lot of people don't really realise how much of your old stuff you want back, and more importantly, being who you were before the event. So it just really pulled the rug out from under us, and we had to re-establish who we were. We had to re-establish ourselves as people with trauma. Sort of 4 months after I found myself with a GP the first time. And the GP sort of said, well, how long ago did this happen? And I said, it's been 4 months now, because I was starting to get anxiety in response to triggers that things that I didn't notice. Like one thing, that living at mum's house, initially next to her fridge, for whatever reason, her fridge heats the floor. And I remember just standing near the fridge looking for something, and just this anxiety overwhelmed me, and I didn't connect that heat that I felt on the floor of the night of our fire I felt that same sort of heat through the floorboards standing in front of her fridge. So there was things like that. Smoke was a big trigger. There was things that were starting to overcome me, and I was starting to experience anxiety, not directly related to anything that should have caused anxiety. So I sort of went off to the doctors to get some help with that. And as I said, like he just said, it's extraordinary that you are only now seeking help, and you obviously have a very good family and support network to have been able to navigate up until this time. And then I ended up getting some help, because we had my eldest son was experiencing some night terrors and not coping and not feeling safe. So we ended up getting some support from psychology. And then it just kind of has been different stages and different impacts on the boys. And yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about how it kind of went. And it wasn't until, I guess, the most important thing for me was, as part of my workplace, part of my gym, we had that I had someone come in from Firefoxes, who was the group of women that got together and created a community organisation after King Lake. And we were sitting there, and I'd sort of met her, I think it was like 8 or 9 months after my fire. And the whole time throughout the process, I kept just feeling that I just need to get over myself. It's like, get over yourself. It's been 2 months. Get over yourself. It's been 3 months. Like, just get over, like, why can't you integrate back into your life? And it wasn't until I spoke to her that, we just sort of talked about it, and I just couldn't believe that all of a sudden I was facing someone that could finish my sentences and knew exactly how I was feeling. And I didn't feel like I'd experienced enough of a trauma. I actually felt really bad talking to people in bushfire, because I thought, their loss has been so much greater than mine. Like, I felt like I really needed to just get over myself and not feel what I was feeling, I guess. And it wasn't until I spoke to her and she said, look, Snez, you have got she said, look, let's just talk again in 3 years' time. And I just kind of felt like, okay, so this is a normal, natural process that I'm going to. This is going to take time. And I kind of was able to let myself off the hook a bit. And so as a result of that conversation and this sort of underlying intention of wanting to help people in a similar situation, I started to sort of, it wasn't until quite some time after that I was able to work on the project, but I just knew that giving people, that sort of awareness that this is a huge event and it is quite impactful, to give themselves the permission to go through that process is really important to me, because it's something that I just felt like I just felt there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't cope. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Snez. Tell us a bit about Survive and Thrive. So that's the program you've obviously developed off the back of your experience. So did you want to just talk to us about what that is, how long it took you to get to a point where you could turn your experience into Survive and Thrive as well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like, it was sort of that grand idea that I had at the start, and sort of that first year of after the fire, I actually engaged someone to help me write a book, because I kept waking up and I just kept having these chapter ideas about the different stages. And I actually engaged someone to help me, and we just mapped out the different stages. And that was sort of the first year, but it wasn't until 4 years, I think it was like 5 years, 4 or 5 years, that I started to actually think about that idea again and start to work on it and put it together. And look, Survive and Thrive, when I say we, I've just had another lady who's helped me alongside of it, but when I first started working on the project, my intention was to be able to create a resource that would help people navigate through that first 24 hours, like who to call, what to do. And just because I felt like in those initial stages, my ability to think clearly and sequentially was really affected. And so the ability to just have to let go and let other people take over, which that's not generally who I am as a person, just had to happen. So I'd kind of walk in and my sister would go, okay, so today you're doing this and then you're going to go there. And I'll be like, I'll just do whatever you just said. I'll just follow along. And so that was really helpful because I didn't have that clarity to think myself. So I wanted to create a resource that not only gave people those initial stages, but also was able to take people through to, what we like to call resilient recovery, which is anywhere sort of 3 to 5 years, depending on, the incident. And I wanted to be able to showcase the magnitude of the event and the impact, to give people that experience of going alongside of somebody else's journey and feeling like they it's okay that they're going through these different stages and that it's taking so long and they're feeling the way that they're feeling. So it was meant to be initially a resource. And when I first started thinking of it, I got into contact with, I kept saying MFB, but I got into contact with them and we had a sit-down conversation about it. And it was really quite healing for me because they outlined a few of the services and things that I probably could have accessed. And they actually just genuinely said, look, we think you just kind of slipped under the radar and the dots weren't connected for you and the right people that, probably should have made those connections didn't occur. So it was a unique situation. I get not everyone's situation is my own. But in that conversation I initially contacted them to find out if they were happy to put a brochure, on their trucks. And that sort of spilled into, well, firstly, no, you can't put any extra weight onto our trucks. And then it spilled into a real understanding that there was that initial step to recovery that was so undefined, varied so much from council to council, and no one really knew who was responsible for that first step. And in conversations with Rob, he said that there was, and Martin was the two people I spoke to, but they both said that, the firefighter's job and sort of culture at that point was very much wet on red. You put the fire out and you pack yourself up and you go to the next job. And then we just sort of went, well, you know what, there's people being left on the side of the road there. And that's kind of how we were left. And we had a strong network of, neighbours that helped coordinate the event, family we could go to, but not everybody has that. So then they kind of moved the direction of the project into, well, who is responsible? Who can take ownership of these people? Who can be of service at this particular time? And then that spilled out into me meeting with Red Cross and DHHS and councils and so many different groups of people just to go, who is taking that first step? And I've been able to, and that's where the idea of the that clip that you just showed, I think it's all in all, I think it's 8 minutes of training. And so that's been shown, which I'm not sure if anyone online today has seen that before, but that was used to get people thinking about, well, what is that next step? What resources? Who is the next contact point? And I've done a bit of work in that space to just ask the questions. And I mean, ultimately, I've been very lucky to get in front of and be able to be in conversation with some significant people in emergency and recovery. And simply because I'm just a member of the public, I don't have any intention or agenda behind me in terms of coming from any organisation. And as I mentioned to you, Lisa, when we first met, is that the Survive and Thrive project, which is now a website resource, I don't even generally want ownership of that in the future. I just want to be able to get it out there. So I think coming from that space and that honesty and sharing that story of an identified area of a need, I've been able to have some really fantastic conversations, and have been told that once that video started to be shown and some of the work that was happening, that it was making a difference. And that was, that was something that came out of the Survive and Thrive project that I wasn't expecting to come out of. So it was just that connecting those dots and just asking the questions, well, what does happen? Let's try and get a more uniform approach amongst councils in terms of what actually does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So now on, I guess, reflection of your experience back then, what are 3 pieces of advice you'd tell yourself standing on the side of the road that you probably didn't get at the time?
Yeah, I think the first one is to connect as quickly as you can with just a local GP. I think it's just really important. Like in reflection, when I think back now, we all suffered smoke inhalation. None of us got checked out. Like an ambulance didn't show up on the day, which again, that was another unique situation. And I think because it was communicated that we had all kind of moved out of the home, everyone was safe. And at the next door, the kids were eating lollies at 1 o'clock in the morning and watching movies, that we're all okay. But that's one thing I would definitely, not only for the physical side of things, but also just for that mental health and support. The other thing, our biggest help in the whole process was insurance. So our insurance companies, and this is something that the Survive and Thrive project always keeps coming back to, is that the sequential support and the process that insurance companies guide you through is actually nothing better than it. Like we keep talking about, well, the council should be, the first contact person, and they can kind of give us this information. But because insurance deal with this all the time, like they were able to direct us to, well, who do you need to call to remove your house? And, where, you need the fencing and you need to switch this off. And so they were really fantastic. And we haven't relied as a project on that being the go-to step simply because there's a lot of non-insured. And that's the reality of it. So just very sensitive to that. But I think getting people just to do that as the first phone call they make, like our case manager was just brilliant and saw us through the whole time pretty much until we're in our new home. So so that was really good. And then the other thing is just counsel, and just to get that community support, and just so that some of these conversations, so that they're aware of what's happening, and that they're aware of the people behind the lot that needs to have its rates increased. So I think because once that sort of connection was made and that understanding was there, like that all changed in terms of their expectation of us. But I think I probably would have reached out to council more and utilised some of the local services and some of the members just as support. You just need people that know what steps are to tell you what steps you have to take, and it's a much quicker way to get yourself back into routine, which is one of the most essential things that I will add as well, is just to get into some form of routine, especially if there's kids involved, to create some sort of sense of familiarity, because nothing's familiar. You're not in the same clothes, you're not in the same, like everything changes. So getting things in place that look familiar, such as waking up at the same time, or reading a book before bed with the kids, or doing this, or this particular activity, it's really important. And just getting lots of support. So I think in between insurance, GP and council, they're just people that can be a really solid guide when it just feels so completely overwhelming as to what to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. With regards to most people on the call today are emergency management practitioners in one form or another. What can we, I guess, take away from your experience back to our roles, I guess, to help with people that might end up in a similar position to you moving forward?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just just having an awareness of the actual impact. And losing things isn't just losing things, it's a lot deeper than that. And I think just that's really, really important, just to understand that when people go through that process, it is a form of trauma. And so trauma has its stages and the recovery time that takes. And reinstating things, I think, is the biggest issue when people are supporting you, because, and I've even spoken to some people, there might be some on the group from Marysville that, they felt that those reinstating of some of those community buildings went up too quickly for them. And, the government came in and just went, hey, we're having this big opening ceremony, for all these wonderful new facilities that we've just, but you're just thinking, well, that facility doesn't make me feel any better. That facility is not going to get me any closer to navigating this journey that I need to get through on my own. So I think just an awareness of bringing, getting someone back into their environment with all of their things is not a priority in this initial stages. Well, it is if you don't know where to live, but I guess you know what I mean, is that just recognizing that there really needs to be that emotional support and acknowledgement of loss. And it's such a major loss. And especially like I lost my entire home. Like we owned an empty block of land for 3 years, and different people, his experience is very different, but I think that's really important. And I think just the different stages of trauma that people are going through as well. And just that initial stage where we're just so heightened and there's just that adrenaline response, and just understanding where people are and being able to communicate in that way. So, being sort of calm and sort of, asking people how they're feeling in those initial stages where they're kind of in action mode, can be, it may feel like it's a little bit unhelpful. Whereas if you sort of understand where they're at and what stage they're at, you can deliver the information, what they need most, in that sort of tone and in the way that they're able to receive that information and be able to do something with it. And I think just any resources like that, I think it's really important that people can, read other people's experiences, or just have a checklist, or, just something that you can follow along with that will normalise, if for lack of a better word, your experience and give you direction. I think direction is really important, and moving forward and getting back to routine. I think, that was the most helpful advice that we got, was just get back into routine as quickly as possible, because the longer we stay out, it just creates more overwhelm and more confusion. Because when you're sort of coming back from that sort of event, there's so much to re-establish. Whereas if you just do some routine things, you feel like you're getting a little bit of a handle on it, I guess. So I think they're sort of the main things, I guess, just awareness of magnitude, awareness that the recovery process is so much more than about getting your things back. And then just understanding like the different stages and where people are at and how they're processing information, what they can hear, what they can take on. And just, I think, just really acknowledging the magnitude of loss and trauma, generally speaking. Like that's something that, so just quickly, like my background's, I'm Macedonian, and we deal with loss in a very specific way, especially when it comes to death, for example. And like there's a whole process around mourning. And I feel that sometimes in our culture, in the Australian culture, there isn't that. Like we're trying to like really speed things up and sort of get past it and kind of re-engage back into our lives. And sometimes we just need to take it a little bit slower and just work through the different stages of emotion. Like obviously, once the foundational things about food and somewhere to live and clothing are sorted out. So I guess they're sort of main things.
That's really great advice. Thank you. So for the last 15 minutes of the session, I'm really keen to turn the spotlight, I guess, onto the rest of the people on the call. First of all, to ask any questions of Snez that you want to know more about, but also it really hit home for me when I originally was speaking to Snez about the program itself and how she's not out to get funding or profit from the program, but really just embracement from the emergency management sector on how to bring it more into resources to actually be delivered on the ground and utilised, I guess, more frequently. So does anyone on the call have any creative ideas, solutions or guidance for Snez in terms of moving forward with her program? But also, do you have any questions generally that you'd like to ask?
Lisa, just quickly, just to help support sort of those questions that may be coming. So with the project at the moment, we do have it in a website form, but I'm at that stage now where we go, okay, well, where does this website live? What is it connected to? And I guess that's sort of in alignment with, what's that next step? And that's sort of where I am in the journey, looking for, some good advice or some tips in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So any thoughts, ideas? Ruth?
Yes, Snez, thank you very, very much for such a sensitive and insightful journey for us with you alongside, traveling with you through this. It must have been an incredible time. And I really want to congratulate you for being able to both stay with it, but also stand apart from it, in a sense, to be able to think about it and then communicate so clearly, and then take the steps that you have. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'm wondering, Snez, because I'm not familiar with the detail, whether your learnings, you were talking a lot about the support you received from neighbours, friends and family. How accessible for those groups are your learnings for in the future?
Yeah,
So
and that's a
sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because the website is designed to be able to be accessed by people from council that are supporting people, and definitely there's a section for family and friends on the website that talks to them about how to best support people that are going, family and friends that have been through, survivors of fire. So it's really important, and that's the website's designed in such a way that it's informational and sequential, so that anybody can access it. So you could access and go, well, I've just come across these people that had this fire 6 months ago. I'll go to that section of the website and just think about, what sort of things could they be experiencing at this time.
Yeah, that's great, because that is so important, as you've been able to share with us, Snez. My other question too is, unfortunately for you and your family, it seems there weren't any serious physical injuries, or and nobody died. Have you been able to develop your learnings so that it would incorporate those situations if they do occur?
Absolutely. And that's an area that for me was very, very difficult to face, because our experience, our youngest son, as the story tells, woke us up. He was 7.5 months old. He woke up for what I thought was a feed, and it was an unusual time for him to wake up. And so I was actually in bed breastfeeding him while I smelt something, and I said to hubby, hey, I can smell something, you want to get up? And from that moment to the time that we had a bit of a look around and located where it was, it all happened very quickly. So, I mean, for us, there is that sense that had he not woken us up, and had we woken when it had taken hold, it could have been a different situation for us as well. And we live with that every day. And so it was very hard for me to face that section of the website, and it does exist on the website. And I'm not sure if you remember, quite a number of years ago now, it was actually 12 months at the same time of year, not the same day, but the same time of year, there was the chef who lost his wife and 3 daughters in a fire. And that was very difficult for us. We were experiencing our 12th-month anniversary, you'd call it that. But that was very difficult for me, and creating this, because that potentially could have been us in any form or shape. And when I started putting together the website, I knew that that is the reality of these situations. And so we've put very general advice around that, just to address that it does occur, and just directing people to who they need to contact. And again, it's just about that step-by-step process of organising a funeral and passing some of that that responsibility to another family member. So there's resources on the website that address it, not in great length, and I'd probably eventually like to maybe connect with someone that has had that experience that can really cement that side of it. But I found it very difficult to even think of that part of it. It's very difficult for me to address that side, because like I've spoken about it for many years now, and I've spoken to many councils and been in front of lots of groups, so I'm getting used to talking about it. But as you can see, it still pulls and emotionally at you. So definitely it's on the website in a very basic form. It's there as an acknowledgement, but I'd love to eventually expand that to give people some information, like further support and information.
And there's also too, if people are injured, burnt, which is, awful experience both for the injured person as well as family and friends. Obviously, if they're injured, they're transferred into hospital, but then there's children children going back to school, or for adults in their workplace. So making those connections and links back into mainstream community. Yeah.
And Sally, your ideas and your considerations are really helpful, because ultimately I'm sharing my experience, and that's where, as this project grows, I'd love to see other contributors to share their individual experiences and build into the website their experience and what was important to them. And definitely I see that, evolving over time. But we do have, the things that the advice that we were given, connecting with the school, a lot. It was all over the papers. It was all over the news. So, some of the kids and family members had seen more. The kids around my kids had seen more of the house fire than what my kids had. So we never took them back in there, outside of that one photo that I think you saw of me taking baby Alexander in there. But my kids, we never went back. We went back and we looked at it from the outside, but they were 3, just turned 3 and just turned 6. And just felt it was too frightening and too devastating. And it wasn't an image that I wanted them to have. So dealing with people around us, and there was they went to school, and my eldest son came home one day and said, "Oh, Mum, is it true? I saw they saw my bed had fallen through the floor." And because it was all burnt out, and it was that sort of thing. So the school ended up gathering the kids back, or that was from a family member, and then the kids, the school had an assembly and just had a bit of a conversation with the kids, and especially in the classroom that Jeremy was part of that year, just to acknowledge what's happened for him, and that these are the things that he may be feeling. And the school was just absolutely fantastic. But yeah, and they're definitely the things that we've included within, because there's just so many aspects, and I think that's the value of the project is, what do you do about this, or how do you tell your kids, and we've tried to capture that in short snippets, but just giving people enough to either get them to research further. But sometimes you don't even think about these things. You just don't think until it faces you, and it just adds to everything else that needs to be done. And unfortunately, we just we move just into trying to rebuild ourselves back from a perspective of things, and we tend to forget the people. And that's something that we did quite clearly. Was my husband went into the rebuild and into whatever he had to do with the home. I was solely looking after the kids and just dealing with them the whole time. So we had a very different experience of the fire, my husband and I.
Thank you very much, Snez. It sounds like it's a wonderful project, and it's one that you're really developing and taking forward. It's feeling, it sounds as if it's really filling such a niche.
Yeah, and I think I called you Sally before. I realised it's Ruth, so I apologise.
It's okay.
Thanks, Ruth, for your questions and comments there. We've also had some in the chat, Snez, just thanking you for your story and suggestions around taking it forward. Acknowledging the time, but we do have time for a last question or comment if someone had something they wanted to share. Hey, Mandy.
Mandy here. Snez, thank you for sharing that. I'm a municipal recovery manager, and I, with a team who share an after hours phone, respond in the first instance to people with house fires. So there was some interesting things you added there, which was useful to listen to. And actually 2 of the people on that team have actually had their entire house burned to the ground. So they bring an extra wisdom to us, and also make us, because they're colleagues at council, make us very aware of what it looks like on the outside, because we all sort of shared that journey with them. Is the website already accessible, this information to share and to use?
It just needs to have it is accessible. The only thing is it's very much in its skeletal stage, is that it's just has content.
Yeah.
We still need a few items approved before we can actually start to sort of let it out into the open and for public view. But if you did want to, I don't know, Lisa, if we can send the link out in some way, like I need to sort of come and grab it. But yeah, because it's just in its sort of building phase. It doesn't look pretty. It has a logo, but it's just got all the information there. It still needs to be proofed, and yeah, it's still a little bit away from where it needs to be. And that's that sort of next step, because just talking to Susan, Lisa, who you directed me to, a suggestion that I've been given is to actually connect with an organisation, take the resource and develop it with the organisation, so it becomes part of the organisation, rather than offering a complete and finished product that then an organisation needs to somehow absorb, I guess, into their own resources. So that's where I'm at, that sort of point now, where just getting to that next step of where does this sit, and because yeah.
Bushfire Recovery Victoria, which is supporting recovery much broader. Are you in Victoria or New South?
In Melbourne, yeah.
Melbourne. So they may be worth a conversation, because while they were formed and tasked around bushfire recovery, they are expected to step up and support beyond bushfire recovery. So they may be worth talking to us as a starting point.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. I'll definitely follow them. I'm good at calling people and just keep doing it until the doors open. Yeah.
I can probably connect you to a couple of people there, Snez and BRV as well. Sally, you've got your hand up. If others need to drop off, because I know we've hit time, feel free to. That's no worries at all.
Yes, hi. So I'm just trying to work out how to put my camera on, sorry. Hi, thank you so much for sharing that story. It was incredibly confronting and harrowing in so many ways. So it's an incredibly brave story to tell. And it's one that we've, I suppose, similar ones that we've heard far too many times through CFA. I just wanted to ask whether you'd actually reached out to anyone at CFA with regards to the program.
No, not yet. No, we haven't. And only because I had that connection, that early connection with, I keep saying MFB, but, and no, I haven't. The short answer is that. Is that something that you'd recommend?
Oh, look, it's just something that as I was sort of hearing your story, that I'd like to infiltrate, I think, into some areas of the organisation, or at least make an awareness of it, that it's out there, because, you know, there might be some areas that could, you know, provide some benefit to you. So it's something that I put into the organisation, just sort of, just for people's awareness, and just know and learn about your story, and just see whether there's anywhere that they can add value.
Yeah. No, I will. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've got a connection because the CFA were part of who attended that night for us. And I'm actually, you know, where we've moved now is in quite a bushland area, which is interesting. But I do have a connection with someone there, but I never actually thought to, yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Sally.
Thanks.
Alrighty, well, acknowledgement of time, and oh, Mandy, you go.
Just one quick one, because I know at the moment there are quite a few courses being run for municipal recovery managers who are in fact tasked with the bit that was missing in the response to your fire. Some of those trainers might be good to speak to, because they could actually include it in their training for recovery managers. So there are some private companies such as the 6 Cs. There's only a couple across the state who do that training. And if they picked it up, then you would be getting people as they're coming on board as municipal recovery managers and be able to win hearts early and make sure that they've got the message, even if it's coming from other ways as well.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because that's one thing that changing of culture is big and challenging to achieve. So bringing informations to new people coming in, I think, is definitely the way to make change in future for sure.
Yeah,
no, that's really good.
Mandy, before you drop off, would you be able to post in the chat the name of the organisation?
Yes, I'll just find the details somewhere. And
thank you. All right, well, thank you very much, Snez. I so appreciate you, so emotionally and so vulnerable, you're being so vulnerable with us and sharing your story. And it looks as though, and I know I'm taking a lot away from the conversation, but it sounds as though others are as well, which is fabulous. So before you drop off, I would recommend have a read through the chat. There's lots of thank yous there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do, yeah.
Yeah, and if you send me through the details of the website, I can send that out to everyone that was registered to attend as well. But thank you all for joining as well. And I can also attach your contact details to that as well, Snez, if you're keen.
Oh, yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Thank you so much for today. I really, really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you all. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and stay in touch.